What did you do before you started flying for CNAC?
I ferried airplanes for the U.S. Air Corps and instructed pilots for about 2 or 3 years. And then as the war began to slow down, the schools started to close up, and CNAC and the other airlines like Eastern and TWA came around and interviewed these instructors at the schools because pilots were pretty scarce. And I had a choice of TWA, Eastern, and CNAC. And I decided, since I'd been in the States all the time during the war, I wanted to get overseas and see what it was really like.
So you were looking for some adventure?
Yes, definitely.
What did you know about CNAC's flights?
I knew very little, really, until I got there. I knew that we would be flying with Chinese co-pilots, Chinese radio operators, and be flying the hump, and that's about all I knew.
Had you known that the hump became known as the aluminum trail after a while because of some of the plane crashes there?
That was after I got there. And the Air Corps had a much worse record than we did. We lost enough airplanes, but the Air Corps lost many more. A lot of them on ferry flights where they'd ferry fighters over to China from India, and they didn't have any navigation equipment on board. That was a lot of the aluminum on the trail.
What was your first flight like, working with Chinese co-pilots and flying
Well,
over
of course,
terrain that was quite treacherous?
Of course, our first flight, we went as a co-pilot. The first few flights, for about a month, I flew as a co-pilot. But then, when I started out flying by myself as a captain with the Chinese crew members, was feeling of being pretty much alone. The Chinese crew members the radio operators spoke good English or wrote good English because they had to do that to use the code on the airplane. They used Morse code. The co-pilots had very little training and not a very good command of the English language quite often. And of course, I didn't speak any Chinese to speak of. So it was pretty much on our shoulders, the captain, the American captain, to do the flying. I liked working with the Chinese. They were nice and courteous and friendly, and I really enjoyed my time over there.
What did your friends think? I mean, did your friends and colleagues, family members, did they think you were crazy to do
Yes.
something like this?
Oh,
Can you
yes.
tell me? What was the reaction?
Well, as you say, they thought I was crazy. When I told my mother I was going, I said, "Sit down, I want to tell you something." I didn't want her to fall down. But it was really a wonderful learning experience for me. I grew up in Texas and stayed there pretty much until that time, until I went to China. And it kind of opened my eyes to the rest of the world.
Do you think the AVG, it was basically it had a short shelf life, but
Yes.
obviously it became world known. And did that kind of expose you to what was out there in a sense? All the coverage of the flying tigers.
Yes.
Can you tell
Yes.
us how that affected your decision?
I heard about that in the early days of the war, and when they were having all the success and all the other fighter groups were having problems, and the Allies were losing in Europe and losing in Asia and the Pacific Islands. So they were kind of my heroes, and I wanted to go over, and I knew that some of them were with CNAC, and that was one of the great pleasures, was getting to know some of those guys.
Can you tell us what's been the most unusual cargo that you've ever carried?
You mean in China? Or?
In China, over the hump.
I can't think of anything particularly unusual. It was probably half of the loads were nothing but gasoline because there was no way to get gasoline over there. And then we had, I never carried any munitions. We carried 10 bars out back to India. We carried money, gold from the U.S. to China to prop up the economy over there, and Chinese money to stabilize the money to try to keep the inflation from getting worse. And we had bales of cotton, we had commissary supplies, we had, I guess the first flight I got on the airplane and it looked like it was empty. There were a few pieces of metal on the floor, and I thought, this is a waste to fly a big airplane over the hump with this little bit of metal, but it was tool steel that was going over there for use in factories so that they would be able to produce things in China to prop up their war effort.
Did you ever think like, okay, I'll never make it back home because?
Oh yes.
You know, can you tell us about that?
I was very doubtful that I would ever reach my 30th birthday.
Why?
Because a lot of my friends were getting killed. We had one accident there after the war in Christmas 1946, where we lost 3 airplanes in one night, and I lost several friends there. And while I was on the way home, I heard about a couple more that crashed. Our conditions were worse after the war than during the war because we didn't have the military support for parts and new airplanes.
What kept you guys going? I mean, what kept you going?
I think it was the spirit of adventure more than anything else. It was a feeling of accomplishment. Where American airline pilots probably flew about an average of 2 years as co-pilot, we flew about a month or 2, and we were on our own with very little in the way of navigation aids or weather information, anything, and over very hostile terrain. One time I had a very strong crosswind, and I knew I had some crosswind, and I was correcting for it, and I wondered. I flew in and out of some clouds, and I came out of this cloud, and there was a snow-capped mountain right in front of me, and I thought, oh God, I'm in the wrong place. I'm too far north, so I made a big turn to the south, and then I figured out that it was the mountain that I should be going by, but we'd had a snow shower, and the mountain peak was covered with snow where it hadn't been the last time I went by there. But I went across the next checkpoint drifting at 30 degrees, which meant I had about 100-mile-an-hour crosswind.
What was your typical day? What time did you get up, and how many, how many hours would you be in the air, and the stopover, and then coming back?
We flew usually a round trip, which was about 7 hours and 20 minutes, I believe. Sometimes we would make a round trip and a half, which was 10 or 11 hours. It was all hours of the day and night. As when we first started out as captain, we would only fly in the daylight for a few trips till we really got to know the route well. But after that, then it was just any time of the day or night.
What attracted you to the Flying Tiger line? airline. Was it also that kind of AVG/CNAC spirit that you just felt it was a normal thing to do? Or was it the money?
Yes, I had a good many friends I knew from CNAC working for Tigers, and I had watched them in the magazines, reading aviation magazines, and I was ready to make a change. I'd been running a flight school, and I was getting tired of that. I wanted to get back to airline flying. And I read where Flying Tiger Line pilots had joined the ALPA, the Airline Pilots Association, and also about the same time they had bought about 25 C-46s, which were almost new, for a very small amount of money. And they only had 8 or 10 airplanes before us, so I knew the company was really going to expand, which it did. And so that's when I decided to come with Flying Tigers.
What was it like actually flying a flight into Saigon? Humanitarian. I mean, was there no feeling, or did you feel?
It wasn't much different from anywhere else. I went into Da Nang, and there was some shooting going on out around the perimeter of the airport. But I didn't have any. I heard gunfire, but that's about as far as it went.